You know how plants from garden centers come with these little tags? The ones with the helpful quotes that say medium light or bright indirect light? I actually have a great suggestion for those. If you follow those tags, you're probably going to kill your plants. In the world of indoor houseplants, those little tags do not actually help grow your plants. In fact, I'd be willing to bet that these tags actually do more harm than good. The first thing that you need to understand is that light can be measured mathematically in two key ways. The first is brightness, and for that you can get a free phone app or an inexpensive light meter. Brightness, which can be measured in lux or foot candles, goes from 0 foot candles in complete darkness or 10,000 foot candles in direct full sun outdoors. And if you're wondering what excellent brightness is for indoor houseplants, you're usually looking towards somewhere around 2,500 foot candles. And anything consistently below 50 to 75 foot candles generally is not enough to sustain the health of your plant. And because light gives off radiation, the second, more accurate way to measure your light is to get what's called a par meter. But because these par meters can cost anywhere from $150 to a bajillion dollars, we're just going to stick with our regular old light meter for now. Now that we understand a little bit more about how light meters can measure light in your home, let's take a look at my place to see exactly what high light might look like. These south-facing windows are the brightest spot in my home, and thankfully in the morning some direct light comes and shines through on the plants that are right up next to the windows. And if I take a light reading, it puts the light at about 45,000 lux, which is around 4,000 foot candles. Indoors, you would classify this as direct sun. 6 feet away on my coffee table, this plant still gets some direct light, but not as long as some of my other plants that are closer to the window. It's giving me a reading of 38,000 lux, which is around 3,500 foot candles. Still considered direct sunlight indoors. This gets direct indoor sun, and this never does, and that's just because of the height of my windows and the angle that the sun takes in the morning, but with a reading on this plant, it's around 1,400 lux, which is closer to 100 foot candles. Looking at the same south-facing direction in my bedroom, you'd think that the light would be identical, but because of my balcony, there's a slight overhang which actually puts the light closer to 6,000 lux, which is around 600 foot candles. And even though there's no direct beams, this is still a perfect spot for a lot of indoor houseplants. You could classify this as medium light. Now, some people, who are snobs, might argue that a basic light meter or a free app is not good enough when measuring light in your home, but I'm here to tell you that it absolutely is. This is because if you're just starting out using light meters, you're mostly going to be using it as a comparative tool. What's brighter, my kitchen window or my dining room window? My bedroom or my bathroom that has no windows? Now, this is really important because the human eye can't really differentiate subtle differences between high light in our homes. 2,000 foot candles might look exactly the same as 8,000 foot candles to us, and that's the difference between a thriving plant or a burnt to a crisp plant. Now, here's the problem. Everything says bright, indirect light. Seriously, all of these tags say the same thing. Your common houseplant wants bright, indirect light. But here's the thing, nobody knows what that means. I've seen people try to model it. I've seen people try to draw a cute little picture to explain it, but every single one does a huge disservice to what bright indirect light is actually supposed to mean. So listen up. Bright indirect light is actually right here in the shade of a giant tree, and it's still over 1,000 foot candles. But it's nothing compared to 10,000 foot candles in direct sun. Or it's here, in a greenhouse, under a shade cloth. It's bright, it's indirect. I mean, just look at the readings. But we're talking about indoor houseplants, and these tags were just never made for us. If you actually used a light meter, you would know that your bright, indirect plant would really be thriving right in this spot. But instead, you follow one of these pictures, you move your plant here, it might do fine, but it's not going to be thriving anymore. So if bright indirect light is actually meant to be above 2,000 foot candles, you might be moving your plant to a spot that only reaches a maximum of 200 foot candles. And that's a big disservice to your plant. And what makes things even worse for people falling into the bright indirect light trap is that they're not considering the quality of their windows and how much light a plant can actually sustain. I live in a condo building, and that means my windows have a pretty high thickness. They block out around 20 to 25% of direct light. But if you live in an older home, or maybe you have a single pane glass window, it might only be blocking out 5% of light. So again, that might be the difference from 6,000 foot candles for a few hours a day or 9,000 foot candles for a few hours a day. And just a couple of extra hours at that level might be the thing that puts your plants over the edge and burns them to a crisp. Specific plant species have an upper limit of how much light or direct light they can handle. So a calathea that can only handle about 1 hour of this intense light might not be a good choice in front of your south-facing single pane glass windows. But a bird of paradise that can handle 3 to 5 hours would be a much better choice. So as the sun moves across the sky, you're never going to have a consistent level of brightness in that exact spot. So taking one single snapshot does not give you a full picture of what the light is actually like in your home. What you're actually looking for is an overall light score of your plant that tracks the light through the course of the entire day. And I actually got so frustrated trying to explain this to people that I got my friend Cal to design an entire app for me that actually solves this problem, which you can download in the description below.
It's 8 a.m. right now, and I wanted to take a look at this snake plant. This guy is actually 4 years old, and this is one of the original leaves. So as you can tell, despite it being 4 years old, it really hasn't grown that much in that time. That's because it's sitting in this corner, and despite being close to these very large windows, it really only gets sunlight for a tiny bit of time in the mornings in the summer. Right now, the sun is about to pass behind a tree, and there's only about a 20-minute space where it gets this kind of light. So if I were to use my light meter to get a reading in the part that's actually touching the sun, my reading is about 1,700 foot candles. But honestly, if I were to come back in 5 minutes, a more honest reading of what this plant usually gets around this time is only 130 foot candles. It's 11 a.m. now. I have a frog on my shirt. Our corner is way darker, and it's only around 50 to 60 foot candles. And finally, at 7 p.m., most of the light is coming from a window across the room, so the reading is about 50 foot candles. This is my Monstera intermediate form that sits in front of these large south-facing windows. At 8 a.m., it gets some direct light through the window, and right now, the light reading is just over 5,000 foot candles. At 11 a.m., it's still getting direct light with a tiny bit of cloud cover, and the reading is 3,000 foot candles. And at 7 p.m., the Monstera is getting around 360 foot candles. This Philodendron giganteum is about 10 feet away from south-facing windows. At 8 a.m., the light reading is 150 foot candles. At 11 a.m., the light reading is around 150. At 7 p.m., the readings are between 50 to 70 foot candles. And using my par meter, the light from this grow light is around 170 ppfd.
So now I can actually predict with extremely high accuracy what my plant's light score is going to be for the entire day. Just take my reading and enter the time. I've also made my own database using research papers and plant fact sheets to know exactly what the light range is for each genus and species of plant. So that's why I know if I wanted to have this snake plant grow faster, I should be moving it to a better spot. But since this plant is really low light tolerant at a minimum light score of 1 DLI, I'm actually just fine where it is. I don't need it to grow huge, I just need it to look nice. So next time someone asks you about bright indirect light, you tell them, I don't want to hear it, I just care about your light score and is your plant getting enough through the whole day. And if you really want to know how important light is, you can just check out this video here.